My cousin tried to hit on every date I brought to the holidays. Thanksgiving. My name is Rachel and I'm 33 years old. I grew up in a big family where everyone lives close by and skipping a holiday gathering is basically a crime. You'd face the wrath of Grandma Joyce. Brianna is my cousin on my mom's side, 2 years younger than me, and the golden child of the family. She's annoyingly beautiful, long blonde hair, bright green eyes, the kind of woman who could wear a potato sack and still turn heads. And she knows it. She's known it since we were kids and never hesitated to use her looks to get her way. The first time it happened, I was 23. I brought my boyfriend Kevin to Thanksgiving at my aunt's house. We'd been dating for about 4 months. He was sweet, a little shy, a graphic designer who loved movies. I was nervous about introducing him to my loud, boisterous family, but he insisted he wanted to meet them. He said he was serious about me. That Thanksgiving started off well enough. We ate, we talked. Kevin was doing okay despite the chaos. Then, after dinner, we were all hanging out in the living room. Kevin and I were on the couch chatting with my uncle when in swoops Brianna. She plopped herself right between Kevin and me on the couch, literally wedging into the space and pushing me aside. Then she turned all her attention on my boyfriend, acting as if I wasn't even there. She laughed at his jokes, twirled a strand of her hair, even placed her hand on his arm when he made her laugh. And her outfit, she was dressed like she was going to a nightclub, not a family dinner, tiny red dress, sky-high heels. It was completely inappropriate, but of course no one said anything. I sat there, jaw clenched, watching my cousin pour it on thick. Kevin looked uncomfortable, shooting me apologetic glances, but he was also a 23-year-old guy and Brianna was stunning and overtly flirting. He didn't exactly push her off. By the end of the night, I found them in the kitchen, just the two of them. She had her hand on his chest and was giggling at something he said. The moment I walked in, they sprang apart. Brianna gave me this innocent smile and said, "Oh hey. I was just telling Kevin how lucky he is to have you." Right. Lucky to have me. The drive home was silent and tense. Kevin kept saying nothing happened. She was just being friendly, but I felt sick to my stomach. 3 weeks later, he needed space and broke up with me. A month after that, I saw a photo on Facebook of him at a bar with his arm around her. My heart sank into my shoes. I knew then that this was no one-time thing. After that, it became a pattern. Every single time I brought a boyfriend to a holiday, by the end of the night he'd be half in love with Brianna. It didn't matter if it was Christmas, Easter, 4th of July. If I walked in with a date, she would flash her perfect smile and sink her claws in. When I was 25, I brought my then-boyfriend Jake, a paramedic, to Easter brunch. Brianna cornered him by the dessert table and spent half an hour raving about how she volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends. By the time we left, she had his phone number under the pretext of having him come, help with the puppies sometime. I later discovered she was texting him every day. A few weeks after that, Jake dumped me out of the blue. Soon enough, I saw on Instagram that he had indeed started volunteering at that shelter, with Brianna, of course. When I was 27, I brought a boyfriend named Ethan to a 4th of July cookout. At one point during the party, Brianna complained loudly that her home Wi-Fi was acting up and all her work files were stuck. Ethan, being an IT guy, offered some advice. She seized the opportunity, batting her eyes and saying, "Maybe you could come by sometime and fix it? I'd owe you big time." Sure enough, he went over to her apartment that very weekend, without even mentioning it to me. When I found out and confronted him, he actually accused me of being jealous and paranoid. A month later, I caught him walking hand in hand with her at a local festival. He had the gall to tell me my jealousy pushed him away. And those are just 2 examples. There was Mark, Julian, Chris. Different guys, different circumstances, same story. If I dared to bring a man around, it was like I'd served him up on a silver platter to my cousin. Brianna never failed to at least try to steal them, and more often than not, she succeeded. The worst part was that my family never really called her out. In fact, they almost acted like I was to blame. I remember after one particularly humiliating Christmas, my mom pulling me aside and saying, "Honey, you know how Brianna is. She doesn't mean any harm. She's just young and playful." My aunt, Brianna's mom, sniffed that if I couldn't handle a little friendly competition, maybe I shouldn't bring boyfriends around. And my grandma tooted and said, "Men are easily distracted, dear. Maybe doll yourself up a bit more and you wouldn't have these issues." Each comment was salt in the wound. My feelings, my heartbreaks, none of it seemed to matter to them. So I did the only thing I could think of. I stopped bringing dates to family functions entirely. For years, I showed up alone to every holiday. I even started skipping some family gatherings altogether. If I didn't show up, then at least there'd be no new drama. I was lonely sometimes, but it felt safer that way. With no love life to speak of and extra time on my hands, I decided to volunteer at the local library. They had a program where volunteers became pen pals with prison inmates working on their education. It was outside my comfort zone, but I figured maybe I could do some good and take my mind off things. That's how I began writing to Matthew. He was 35 and in the final year of a 6-year sentence for robbery. His first letter was polite and shy. He thanked me for volunteering and said he wanted to improve himself before he got out. I wrote back about ordinary things, my job in tech, how the autumn leaves were turning gold, simple, friendly chit-chat. He replied with surprising honesty. He admitted he'd fallen in with the wrong crowd when he was younger and that prison had been a hard wake-up call. He told me he was taking courses and hoped to get into construction work once he was released. There was a raw sincerity in his words that drew me in. One letter turned into many. Soon we were exchanging mail every week, then multiple times a week. I found myself opening up more than I expected. I even vaguely mentioned that I'd been hurt in relationships before and had family issues. I didn't spill all the gory details, but he got the gist. Matthew never judged me or offered trite advice. Instead, he wrote things that truly resonated. In one letter, he said, "Sounds like your cousin tears people down to make herself feel better. That's about her, not you." Reading that was like a bomb on a raw wound. He was right, it was about her, not me. Over about 8 months, our letters became the brightest part of my week. I learned he grew up with barely any family support. His mom had died when he was a teen, and his only real connection was an aunt who'd offered to help him when he got out. He learned a lot about me too, my love for hiking, my habit of baking when I'm stressed, my fears and hopes. Through those letters, a bond formed, one deeper than I'd had with anyone in a long time. A couple months before his release date, Matthew gently asked if I would be open to meeting in person for a cup of coffee once he was out. No pressure, he wrote. My heart did a flip reading that. I was nervous. This was completely unlike anything I'd ever done, but I was also excited. I wrote back and told him yes. He was released in mid-November, about a week before Thanksgiving. A few days later, I walked into a little coffee shop, heart pounding, to finally meet him face to face. I spotted him right away. We'd exchanged a photo or two. Tall, short dark hair, a tentative smile as he recognized me. He looked nervous too. Then he smiled wider, and that warmth I knew from his letters was right there in his eyes. We sat in a quiet corner and talked for hours. And when I say talked, I mean talked, no awkward pauses, no weird expectations. It was like meeting up with an old friend. He was witty and a great listener. I probably babbled a bit out of nervous excitement, but he didn't seem to mind. He told me about how overwhelming it was to walk through a city street after years behind bars, how he stood in a grocery store aisle his first day out just marveling that he could choose any item he wanted. By the time the coffee shop was closing, we'd already made plans to see each other again. Before long, we were officially dating, though it felt like the most natural progression of our pen pal friendship. Being with Matthew was unlike any relationship I'd known. He was attentive and open and completely free of games. If he said he'd call, he called. If something was on his mind, he told me. He listened to me, truly listened, as if every word mattered. I felt seen and understood in a way I never had before. By mid-November, I was cautiously happy again. That's when my mom called, asking if I would come to the family Thanksgiving at her house. It had been over a year since I'd shown up at a holiday gathering, and I could hear the hope in her voice. Even Grandma was asking about me. I hesitated. I hadn't told my family much about Matthew yet for obvious reasons. And the idea of walking back into that lion's den made my stomach flip. But sitting there on the couch with Matthew, his hand in mine, I realized I didn't want to hide away forever. I wanted to share my family traditions with this man who had become so important to me. So I told Mom I'd think about it. Then that night, I explained everything to Matthew, the whole ugly history with Brianna. I warned him point blank, if you come with me, there's a very real chance my cousin will pull something. It's practically her tradition. He raised his eyebrows in mild surprise. It's not every day you hear a soap opera saga about your girlfriend's cousin. But then he just gave me a calm, reassuring smile. I survived 7 years in prison, Rachel, he said softly. I think I can handle your cousin. If you want me there, I'm there. I'm not going anywhere. I blinked back a few tears at that. We're a team, right? He added, squeezing my hand. That settled it. For the first time in years, I decided to face a family holiday with a boyfriend by my side, and I dared to hope this time might actually be different. Thanksgiving Day, my stomach was doing somersaults. As we pulled up to my parents' house, I actually felt a little sick from nerves. Matthew reached over and gently rubbed my back. "You've got this," he whispered. Walking through the front door with him felt surreal. My mom practically ran to hug me. "There's my girl." She was beaming. My dad shook Matthew's hand, sizing him up, and then broke into a smile when Matthew handed over the flowers he'd brought for my mom. Within minutes, Matthew was chatting easily with my family, laughing at my uncle's corny jokes, complimenting my mom's cooking, talking tools and home projects with my dad. They bonded over both having swung a hammer or two, Dad over his backyard deck, Matthew over construction classes he'd taken. I hovered nearby, tense and watchful, waiting for the inevitable storm that was my cousin. But for a little while, things were actually nice. I started to breathe again. Maybe, just maybe, this could work out. Then I heard the front door open with a burst of chilly air and a clack of high heels on the floor. Showtime. In swept Brianna, fashionably late and dressed to kill. She had on a sleek black dress that hugged her figure and stiletto boots that made her already long legs look endless. Her hair was perfectly curled, her makeup expertly done. She looked like she was headed to a cocktail party or a photo shoot, not a family dinner. I subconsciously smoothed my simple sweater, feeling dowdy in comparison for a second. Brianna carried a tray of frosted cookies and flashed her megawatt smile at the room. The moment her eyes landed on me, and more importantly, on Matthew standing beside me, her expression lit up like a hunter spotting prey. "Here we go." She came over, all sugary sweet. "Rachel, you made it," she exclaimed, giving me a quick perfunctory hug, for Grandma's sake, I'm sure. Then she turned her attention to Matthew, practically stepping between us. "And who is this?" I swallowed, forcing a polite smile. "Bri, this is Matthew, my boyfriend." Matthew offered a friendly smile and extended a hand. "Nice to meet you. You must be Brianna." She ignored his hand and pulled him into a hug, pressing her chest against him in the process. I had to clench my teeth. Matthew gave one of those awkward one-armed pats and quickly stepped back, returning to my side. "Good man." Brianna's eyes flicked between us, then she gave a little pouty laugh. "I have heard absolutely nothing about you," she said to him, in a tone that was meant to be playful, but carried a bit of a jab toward me for not sharing. "We've been dating a few months," I interjected, keeping my voice steady. She smiled brightly. "Well, it's so nice to meet you, Matthew. I'm sure Rachel is thrilled to finally not be the single one at the table." Oh, I wanted to throttle her for that, but I bit my tongue. Matthew just gave a courteous nod and slipped his arm around my waist. That small gesture felt like a shield. And so it began. Throughout appetizers and then dinner, Brianna hovered near us like a pesky gnat. She made a point to squeeze in next to Matthew when we all sat down to eat. I ended up directly across, with a perfect view of her practically angled into his face. She asked him a million questions, hanging on every answer as if it was the most fascinating thing in the world. Where did he grow up? Detroit. Wow, she loves Detroit. Isn't it tough there? What does he do for work? He just started with a contractor doing home renovations. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. She's been meaning to redo her apartment. Maybe he has tips? Did he play sports? Some basketball in high school. No way, she's so into basketball. Maybe they should shoot hoops sometime. Giggle, giggle. It was relentless. To his credit, Matthew handled it with polite disinterest. He answered her questions, but didn't ask many back. He gave short, bland replies and then would turn to include me or another family member in the discussion, effectively cutting off her flirty one-on-one attempts. Under the table, he kept his foot nudged against mine or his hand on my knee, a constant reassurance. I could see Brianna becoming more and more vexed by her failing tactics. She wasn't used to not being the center of attention. Dinner eventually wound down and everyone migrated back to the living room for pie and coffee. I got momentarily waylaid by Grandma, who wanted my help topping the pies with whipped cream in the kitchen. I cast a quick look at Matthew, who was in the middle of a story with my dad and brother. He caught my eye and gave me a tiny, "I'm okay" nod. I was only gone maybe 5 minutes, but when I returned, my cousin and my boyfriend were nowhere in sight. The living room was crowded with relatives, but Matthew was not on the couch where I'd left him, and Brianna wasn't there either. My heart clutched. I slipped out to the hallway, heart thumping in my ears. Voices murmuring in the dining room caught my attention. The lights were dim. We'd eaten in there earlier, but everyone had moved on. I crept closer, and through the doorway I saw them. They were off in a corner by the sideboard where the drinks were set up. Brianna had positioned herself very close to him. I could just make out her voice, low and dripping with sugar. Really think you could do better, you know. I froze, adrenaline spiking. I was seeing it happen in real time, the same scene I'd lived so many times, but this time I had to know. Matthew's voice came, firm and flat. Brianna, stop. I'm not interested. I peeked around the doorframe. She had one hand lightly on his chest. He looked calm, but definitely annoyed. I was just about to stride in when I saw her pull a small slip of paper from her pocket and try to press it into his hand. Here, she said softly. If you ever want to talk, or anything. Oh, hell no. Before Matthew could even react, I stepped fully into the room. Am I interrupting something? I asked, voice cold. They jumped apart. Brianna's eyes went wide, and for one satisfying second, she actually looked guilty and panicked. Then she plastered on a bright smile. Oh. Hi, she chirped. I was just telling Matthew what a gem you found. Saying how lucky you two are. I glanced at Matthew. In his palm, I saw that little piece of paper, her phone number, no doubt. He met my eyes calmly, then without breaking gaze, he crumpled the paper and set it on the sideboard. Ready to go, babe? He asked me, his voice even. Yep, I said, my voice a little sharper than intended. I looked at my cousin and added, thanks for the chat, Brianna. Her face twitched. She knew I knew. But what could she do? With a tight smile, she just said, drive safe. Happy Thanksgiving, as if nothing had happened. We made the rounds saying quick goodbyes. My mom looked confused that we were leaving so soon, and I just smiled and said we had to head out. She gave me a knowing little nod and whispered, I really like him, honey, while hugging me. I managed a genuine smile and nodded back. I liked him too, more than ever in that moment. The second we were in the car and pulling away, I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for hours. My hands were shaking. Did she really? I began. Offer me her number? Yep, Matthew replied bluntly. Tell me you were insecure and I could do better? Yep. I closed my eyes, equal parts furious and embarrassed. I'm sorry, I whispered. He glanced at me in surprise. What are you apologizing for? You warned me, didn't you? She's clearly got issues. He reached over and took my hand, bringing it to his lips for a quick kiss while he drove. For what it's worth, I shut her down. Immediately. I nodded, throat tight. I know. I saw and heard enough to know that. I had seen him push her hand off his chest, heard him tell her to stop. He really hadn't entertained it at all. That realization is when the tears came. I couldn't help it. All the stress, the build-up, the relief, it just burst out of me in a messy sob. Matthew's eyes went wide. Hey, he said gently, pulling the car over to the side of the road immediately. Why are you crying? Are you okay? It took me a minute to gather myself, but I was able to choke out I'm okay. Actually, I'm great. I laughed a little through the tears. These are happy tears, I swear. He looked utterly puzzled, then I think he understood. He smiled and pulled me into his arms. We sat on the side of that road for a few minutes, me crying into his shoulder, him rubbing my back, and just letting me let it all out. Years of tension and hurt were unspooling and leaving my body with each tear. When I finally sat back and wiped my face, I gave a wet little laugh. I can't believe it's over. She tried, and she failed. I actually won for once. He cupped my cheek and said softly, she never stood a chance, Ratch. Not with me. And then I love you. I had heard those words before from other men, but this was the first time I fully, truly believed them. I love you too, I whispered, feeling a smile spread across my face. As we drove the rest of the way home, I felt like I was floating. It was over. Brianna had finally lost. We had faced the test and we passed. In my heart, I thought, this is it. The nightmare is finally over. And in a way, it was, but unfortunately, there was one more aftershock to come. A day or two after Thanksgiving, the backlash began. Brianna had apparently spun the story to my extended family that I'd brought a dangerous ex-con to dinner without warning anyone. She completely played the victim, acting as if she'd been terrified of Matthew. So instead of getting calls asking how I was doing, I got calls and texts chewing me out. My mom was upset I hadn't told her about Matthew's past beforehand. My aunt said I'd put the whole family in danger by springing him on them. Even Grandma was uneasy now, wondering if she'd been chatting with some kind of criminal at the dinner table. Thanks, Brianna. It was maddening. Brianna lit the match, and I was the one getting burned by the smoke. I tried briefly to defend myself and Matthew. I told Mom that he was a good man, that he'd served his time and was building a new life. Her response, "Well, you still should have warned us, dear." Ugh. It was hopeless. They were all acting like I'd committed some great betrayal of the family trust, when in reality the only person who'd done anything wrong was Brianna. So I stopped engaging. I let their calls go to voicemail. I responded to texts with one-liners or not at all. I was done. Only my younger brother reached out to me separately to say he thought everyone was overreacting and that Brianna was being a drama queen. His exact words, "This is such BS, lol. Love you, sis." At least someone had my back. Matthew, for his part, felt awful. I could see it in his face, the guilt and worry that he was somehow causing a rift in my family. I made it abundantly clear to him that he was not the problem. I told him, "This is on them, on her. You did nothing wrong." It took a few days to convince him I meant it. I hated that my family's stupidity was making him doubt himself. We ended up skipping Christmas with my relatives entirely. Instead, I spent it with Matthew and his Aunt Patty, who welcomed me with open arms. We had a simple, lovely holiday with zero drama. Honestly, it was the best Christmas I'd had in a long time. Just after New Year's, my cousin Hannah, one of the few family members I was still on decent terms with, asked to meet for coffee. When we sat down at the cafe, I could tell she was anxious. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news," she said, "but I think you need to know what Brianna is planning." Apparently, not succeeding in breaking me and Matthew up had driven my cousin a little bit, well, nuts. Brianna became obsessed with trying to ruin things in some other way. She had been stalking Matthew online, digging up old articles about the crime he committed, even contacting one of his ex-girlfriends via social media to see if he had any dirt. She was spiraling. The worst part? She was talking about going to the police and filing a false report. Basically, she wanted to claim that Matthew had behaved inappropriately or threatened her at Thanksgiving, completely fabricate a story, to get a record on file that could mess with his parole or just smear his name. I felt physically ill listening to this. That was a new level of vindictive, even for her. I thanked Hannah for telling me and rushed home to tell Matthew. He took the news with a steady calm that surprised me. His jaw tightened, sure, but he just nodded and said, "I figured she might try something like this." I was in full-on panic mode. "We have to stop her," I insisted. "We should call a lawyer, or tell the police she's planning to lie, something." He took my hands and guided me to sit down. "If she wants to go to the police, let her," he said. I thought I hadn't heard him right. "What?" "No, we can't just." He squeezed my hands. "We'll be ready," he said, a small, clever smile on his face. Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled for a moment. I wasn't sure I'd ever need this, but... He pressed play on an audio file, and I instantly heard Brianna's voice, crystal clear. "Rachel is so insecure. You could do so much better." My jaw dropped. It was that conversation by the drink table. It kept playing. I heard her encourage him to call her, and then Matthew's voice telling her he wasn't interested and she should work on being a better person instead of ruining lives. There it was. Proof. "You recorded it?" I gasped. He nodded. 7 years in prison teaches you to cover your bases. I hit record on my phone as soon as she started talking to me one-on-one. I could have kissed him, I did. I was so relieved. If Brianna filed a bogus police report, we had evidence to blow her story out of the water. Armed with that knowledge, we decided to just quietly wait. If she went through with it, we'd go straight to the police with our recording. If she didn't, all the better. A few weeks later, I'd heard through the family grapevine that Brianna wanted to meet with me in person. I was wary, but I agreed. I met her in a hospital room, of all places. A recent minor car accident had shaken her up, and now she said she wanted to talk. For once, she looked as broken as I'd felt, eyes puffy, hands trembling. As soon as I said hello, she started to cry. Through tears, she apologized over and over. She admitted to everything, flirting with and stealing my boyfriends because she was jealous, lying to the family, even considering trying to sabotage Matthew. She told me she'd spent her whole life tying her self-worth to male attention, that she was terrified of being invisible. "It's not an excuse," she said, sobbing, "but I was so empty inside, and hurting you made me feel powerful for a second." "I'm so sorry, Rachel. You didn't deserve any of it." I let her speak, and I quietly cried too. All the anger I'd held onto was slowly ebbing, replaced by a deep sadness for both of us. I told her thank you for apologizing, that it meant a lot to finally hear her take responsibility. But I also told her I couldn't just forgive her overnight. I said I'd need time and distance, and she understood. I wished her well, I truly did, and I asked her to please leave me and Matthew in peace going forward. She promised she would. I walked out of that hospital feeling lighter. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was the closure I never thought I'd get. Matthew was relieved when I told him about the conversation. "So it's over," he said. "I think so," I replied. From that point on, my life really started to feel like my life. I stopped waiting for the next disaster. In the spring, I moved in with Matthew. We found a small apartment not far from his work, nothing fancy, but it was cozy and ours. We even adopted a rescue dog, a goofy mutt named Jasper, who quickly became our spoiled fur baby. My family dynamics did shift a bit. I stayed in contact with my parents, but I kept firm boundaries. I think they slowly realized how badly they'd let me down, and they did make an effort to be more supportive in their own awkward way. I still wasn't ready to jump back into big family gatherings, and for once, they didn't push too hard. I think everyone needed a breather. A few months later, I received a letter in the mail from Brianna. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won out. In it, she wrote a genuine, soul-bearing apology, even more detailed than the one she'd given me in the hospital. She talked about how deeply she was working on herself in therapy, trying to untangle the reasons behind her behavior. She said she didn't expect me to ever forgive her, and that she understood if I never wanted a real relationship with her again. She just wanted me to know that she was truly, truly sorry, and that I hadn't deserved any of the things she did to me. At the end, she wrote, "I made you feel invisible, and that was wrong. The truth is, I was the one who felt invisible all along." I cried after reading that letter. I cried for the little girl in her that felt unseen, and for the younger me who had been made to feel like I wasn't enough. I showed the letter to Matthew, and he held me while I let all those complicated emotions out. He gently reminded me that I didn't owe her anything, not forgiveness, not even a reply if I didn't want to. I knew he was right. In the end, I did decide to respond, just briefly. I wrote that I appreciated her apology and was glad she was getting help. I wished her well. I didn't say anything about all is forgiven or make any promises. I kept it short and kind. She wrote back one more time to say she understood and was grateful I'd even read her words. After that, we fell out of regular contact. And that was okay. I didn't want or need a weekly phone call with my cousin. I just needed peace. My focus shifted to the life I was building. Work was going well. Home was wonderful. Quiet and drama-free and mine. I'd spend evenings curled up on the couch with Matthew, Jasper's head in my lap, watching some cooking show and just feeling content. I hadn't known contentment in a long time. It felt almost foreign and fragile, but in time I settled into it, allowed myself to enjoy it. A year or so passed quietly. To my surprise, I eventually heard through the grapevine that Brianna had met someone in therapy, a woman named Marisol, and gotten engaged. Apparently, working on herself and finding love in a healthier way really did change her. She even sent me an invitation to her wedding. After some thought, I decided I will attend, with Matthew right there by my side. I'm nervous, of course, but I'm also hopeful. It feels like a chance to truly put the past to rest and maybe even celebrate how far we've all come. These days, I'm not that bitter, insecure woman I once was. My life is simple and happy. I live in a cozy apartment with the love of my life and a dog that we spoil rotten. I have family I can actually talk to without walking on eggshells. I've learned that real love isn't something my cousin can steal or destroy. It's built on trust, respect, and choosing each other every single day. And I've learned to value myself beyond how others treat me. For so long, I was waiting for the next betrayal, the next disaster. Not anymore. Whatever happens at that wedding, awkward moments or happy tears, I know I'll handle it. Because I finally have what I need, a partner who truly loves me, a sense of my own worth, and a life that's peaceful and genuinely mine. That's more than enough. In fact, it's everything.